Hi everybody, I'm Jeremy, and I'm going to talk to you today about entrepreneurship and giving and how I retired at the age of 36 and became a multi-millionaire through giving and humility. I know what you're thinking, nothing screams humility like a guy standing on a stage in front of a gigantic picture of himself, bragging about his wealth and humility. Nevertheless, let's get started. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to tell you how I started 2 different companies, how I became a multimillionaire, some very difficult choices I faced along the way, and how prioritizing giving actually, I think, helped even further my wealth. I retired at 36, and I learned a lot about the financial independence movement and the FIRE movement, and I think it has a reputation of extreme frugality, maybe even to the point of selfishness sometimes, but I don't think that's true, and I think, in fact, when you have a giving spirit and you're humble and you actually give back, it actually accelerates your wealth, not the opposite. So let's start at the beginning. This is me at 22 years old. I was graduating college with a degree in computer science, and I turned down a job offer from Microsoft, a lucrative job offer. And instead, I decided to start a company. I literally had no idea what I was doing. The first year of this company that I started was terrible. I made $14,000. That was my top line revenue. After you subtract expenses, it was much less than that, like not nearly enough to live on, even at the most meager levels. And so I was living on a credit card. I racked up $10,000 in credit card debt that first year just to pay for the groceries. If you're wondering about the company, it's a company called RentLinks. You probably didn't hear about it. It's a service for landlords where they can post an apartment for rent and have it automatically advertised on like 50 different sites. So if you hear me say RentLinks, that's what I'm talking about. And so after that first year of business, I was talking to my mom, who also, by the way, has a degree in computer science from 1974. Not a lot of 41-year-old dudes have moms with CS degrees, but here's one of them. And my mom was actually at a crossroads in her own career, and we were talking. We actually decided to have her join my company. And I sold her 30% of the company for $1,500, which was probably much more than it was worth at the time, given that I couldn't even afford to pay myself. And in a bit of charitable giving of her own, she agreed to not take a paycheck herself for the first year or until we could pay both of us a living wage. This was all I had. I was putting all my chips in this basket or whatever, and I was trying to make a living from this company, and she had enough savings from her previous job to get by for a year or two. So she was very charitable herself and said, okay, we'll work for free until we can afford to pay us both like a modest salary. And we actually agreed on $36,000 a year is how much our salary would be. And so something happened in that first year that I don't think my mom knows, that first year working with her, that I don't think my mom knows. And she also consumes every piece of content that I ever create, so she's about to find out. But when I was working with her, there's this day where I didn't think she was doing a good job. Like, she wasn't measuring up to my standard of perfection, and I didn't know that I was going to get a laugh. It was just true. But I felt this feeling of like chest tightening and anxiety and scarcity. I had given her too much money or too much to the company. Like, we didn't have enough money. Like, it wasn't going to work. And in this moment, I decided to go for a run to burn off some steam. And this is a true story. On that run, I had this moment of clarity. I thought, what are the 2 most extreme outcomes in this situation? In outcome number 1, the business fails brilliantly. If I couldn't do the business alone, I certainly couldn't do it with her. So there's no harm, no foul. Excuse me. My 70%, her 30% is all worthless. So there's no worries about giving her too much of the company. But in the other extreme scenario, the company becomes the most valuable company on the face of the planet, a $1 trillion company, and her 30%. We're both wealthy, and also in this extreme scenario, I assumed, what if she did 0 work for that? What if, it succeeds in this scenario and she did no work? And I realized on that run that I would be fine with that. I love my mom. I'd be happy to give her 30% of everything I have for nothing. And when I had that moment of clarity, it made me realize that all those shades of gray in between were actually fine outcomes too. And so instead of measuring her against this standard of perfection and looking at where her deficiencies were, I decided to just look at it from a perspective of abundance and say, anything my mom can do is great and is going to help the company. And from that day that I realized that until today, I never had a problem with our partnership again. In fact, I think it really helped her be able to give more back and help us grow the company. And grow the company we did. We actually started making enough money to pay her a salary. We actually even, I paid off my credit card debt, and I even started hiring. So I grew up in Michigan, and I moved to San Diego about 10 years ago. And these were the first 2 employees I hired in San Diego. And something weird happened when I started hiring employees, which is they asked questions. Questions like, how much PTO do we get? And remember, I started this company in college, and so I didn't even ever have a PTO policy myself. I had to Google that. By the way, it stands for paid time off. You live and you learn. And when they started asking that question, I had that familiar feeling of chest tightening and anxiety and scarcity, because at this point, we never took any funding for the company. We were bootstrapped. We were barely profitable. I myself was making $36,000 a year. I was living with roommates. I was driving a 99 Ford Explorer. And if you're not, actually 99 Ford Explorer Sport, and if you're not familiar with a 99 Ford Explorer Sport, it's actually a 2-door SUV. It guarantees you that perfect blend of poor gas mileage and inconvenience. And so when my employees were asking about getting paid for not working, I was like, oh man, how are we going to do that? And so I was like, okay, let me think about the options again. In scenario number 1, in the most extreme scenario, I give no PTO. No PTO. And so in that scenario, there's a clear upper boundary to how much work I can get out of them. It's the number of hours in the day or the week. And I've sent a message to my employees that their value is based on just the time their ass is in the seat. Instead of them wanting to do good work, they would be incentivized just to put their time in. Plus, it doesn't sound like a very good place to work, frankly, if they just have to get their hours in, right? So if no PTO wasn't a good option, what is the other extreme scenario? In that scenario, it is unlimited PTO. How would this look? Well, in this scenario, instead of valuing them based on how many hours they put in, I would value their performance by the work that they produce. In fact, as the owner of the company, that's the same policy I had. I was measured not by my hours, but by the success of the company, and I could just take off any time that I wanted. So why not extend that same policy to my team? And so that is what I did. And for the first year, we went forward with this unlimited PTO policy, and it kind of backfired. And it backfired in not the most obvious way, because what happened was they were taking no paid time off. And when I saw that start to happen, I would talk to them. I'd say, what's up, guys? Why aren't you taking any time off? And they said they liked the policy. They felt it was very generous, but they felt an obligation to me and to the rest of their teammates not to take advantage of the policy. So if they took even one day, then it would, they felt bad that they were taking that time away, from the company. And so I thought, oh, this wasn't the intention of the policy. It wasn't to trick people into working every single day. It was to offer a giving, an abundance. So I went back to the drawing board and I thought, okay, if unlimited PTO doesn't work, what is better than that? I thought, okay, how about minimum required PTO? And this is a policy I still haven't heard of to this day, but with this policy, I required my employees to take off 1 week per quarter or 4 weeks per year and go on vacation. On top of that, they could also take longer vacations or take mental health days or obviously time for appointments, anything like that. And my team actually loved it, and they took their time off, and then I feel like this policy of giving actually came back to me and then some, because I had employees who weren't there just to put their hours in, but they're actually showing up to work to do work and appreciated helping make the company better. All right, speaking of employees, I wanted to tell you about an employee who I am going to call Julie. I'm going to call her Julie because that is her name. She was actually the first employee I hired in San Diego, and I hired her from a temp agency. She wasn't temping for me, she was working for a temp agency. I hired her away. She was making $12 an hour, and I hit the employee jackpot. She is a total ass kicker to this day. She does the work of several people. She is effective and efficient and just a super great member of the team. And as I saw this, I decided to continue giving her raises because it was cheaper to give Julie another raise than it was to hire 4 more people to do the job that she was doing by herself. On one of these scenarios when I gave her a raise, Julie actually turned it down. She said, that's not good for the company. We were still bootstrapped. I was still making $36,000 a year. She said, we can use that money better if we put it towards something else. And so I was like, wow, that's unusual for an employee to turn on a raise. So I was like, back to the drawing board. And I thought, okay, if she doesn't just want more money, I decided to give her part of the company. And I wrote up a plan that said, hey, if we ever sell the company, and starting a small tech company is kind of the dream, is to sell it one day. If we ever sell the company, she's going to get a chunk. And I extend her some shares, plus all my other current and future employees. I did the same. And for that policy of giving, I think again it came back to me and then some, because now Julie and the rest of my team, instead of just working just to get a paycheck, they were like their incentives were aligned with mine. We were all wanted the same thing. We weren't just like boss and employee. We were like owners who were trying to like get this company to go somewhere. And it worked really well. So we did one other. Working in tech, we often want to say that we are working to change the world or make the world a better place, but sometimes it feels very abstract because you're just working on some niche website or landlord website or whatever. And so while I was running the company, I came across this charity called 1% for the World. And their basic premise is, if every company in the world donates 1% of their sales to nonprofits trying to directly impact the world, then the world will actually be a better place. We can like solve the world's problems. And while we were like, again, bootstrapped, barely profitable, that sounded good to me. I thought that would like help our company feel like we were an engine for good. And so that's what we did. We joined this, but I thought 1% was a little weak, so we actually made it 2% for the planet. And what we did is every year I would take the entire 2% of our revenue, and then I would split it equally among every employee. Then all my team would choose the charities of their own. And so again, this policy of giving, while on the face seems like I was donating a bunch of our profits, because again, it's sales, not profit, so this could actually make us go in the red. It actually really helped the team feel like we were an engine for good, feel like they're all on the same team, and again, they were producing even better work for me. So then fast forward another few years, and now we're doing about $1 million a year in revenue. But in this world of tech real estate, we were minnows swimming with sharks. There was companies out there with like many, many millions of dollars who could stomp us out if they wanted to. And I was in this environment, I thought we were either going to get acquired or we were going to get sued out of existence. And I much preferred the former. And so I had a plan. I was going to make a bunch of partnerships in the industry. And so I emailed a bunch of companies and said, hey, do you want to be a partner with us? And I thought if I had a bunch of partners, we would be a more attractive acquisition target. And so I emailed like 30 companies, called them, and I got nowhere. It was totally, no one wanted to hear from me, no one wanted to talk to me. And I finally decided to email like the one company who I thought would have been like the perfect partner, like they're the biggest, the fastest growing, the most profitable. And I thought if we could partner with them, we would really have it made. And so I emailed them, and they actually responded, and they said, the company's called AppFolio, and they said, yeah, we'll meet. And so I pitched them and said, here's the plan, I want to do a partnership, I'll give you our product for free, yada, yada, yada. And they said, no, we hate it, we don't do partnerships, that's a terrible idea. And so I was like, well, that's nice you took the call, but what are we doing here? And at the end of the call, they said, well, we don't do partnerships, but sometimes we do acquire or invest in small companies. And when I heard that word acquire, that makes your ears ring as a tech founder, because that might mean they want to give you a lot of money. And at this point, I actually started to worry, is all that giving going to come back to bite me? We were donating about half of our profits, which because we had a very thin margins. I had given like minimum required PTO to my entire team. I had shared, we kind of had this weird sharing plan where the entire team would get some of the money if it was acquired. And in fact, if you look at our numbers, these were our numbers, and so we were doing about $1 million a year in sales. We were just to support a staff of 7 plus our additional expenses. We were spending most of it, plus about half of the remaining profits we were donating. So our profit in that year was about $25,000. Traditionally, companies are valued as a multiple of profit. So if you multiply that $25,000 by 6, which is like a reasonable multiple, you get $150,000, which was about the projected value of our company. $150,000 is a lot of money. It's the most money I'd ever seen in my life up until that point. but it was also about 1 year of that salary I had turned down at Microsoft from 10 years ago, plus my share minus taxes, like it's not nearly 150. So I thought, did all this giving, is that going to burn me? And so it turns out that it didn't. I negotiated with the CEO of that company. We talked about the price and what we could offer. And we didn't agree on $150,000. We agreed on over $5 million. And it turns out they didn't care about our profit. What they saw, in fact, they turned down deals with much more profitable companies that they would have paid less for. But what they saw in my company was this amazing team I had built and the amazing product that my team had built. And so all that giving not only did not burn me, I think actually helped make this really interesting small company that was worth millions of dollars to this acquiring company. And so the deal went through. We sold the company for $1 million, for $5 million. I can't believe I made that mistake. Sold the company for $5 million, and remember Julie? On the day we sold the company, I handed her a check for 6 figures worth multiple years of her salary. So her turning down that raise actually turned out to be a good deal for her. Yeah, you can cheer, Julie. The rest of my team also got big checks relative to all the shares they had. I remember my mom, who invested $1,500 in the company and generously agreed to work for free for a year. Her $1,500 investment turned into over $1.5 million. Yeah, Mom. Hi, Mom, if you're watching this. She's watching. Also, as a term of the acquisition, we agreed to retire her 6 months after the acquisition date. And my mom remains retired until this day, and her portfolio keeps increasing every year thanks to one of her very financially savvy sons. Yes. I won't tell you which son it is, but I will tell you it is not my brother. As for me, at this point in my life, my net worth was about $100,000, and that was just from the old-fashioned way. I was getting paid $36,000 a year. I was the lowest paid employee the entire time I ran the company. I lived on less than that. I invested the difference. Over 10 years, my Roth IRA was worth about $100,000. And then it's kind of a funny story. On the day of the acquisition, I actually took a little video of my checking account website as that wire came in. And I obviously can't show you the video because it's got like my bank account and it's like a personal video. Just kidding, I'm gonna show it to you right now. So just for some context, that number that says 66,000 there, that's my checking account. Normally it had about $2,000 in it, but on this day we had just recently drained, 2 days earlier we had drained my business checking account into my personal account. Actually, me and my mom, we split it. And the reason you do that is when a large company acquires you, they're not buying cash dollar for dollar, they're just buying the entity, so they have you drain the cash from the accounts. And so that $66,000 there was atypical already. It was normally like $2,000, and then this happened. It is April 1st, 2015. I just got an email. Day of the rent links close. I'm going to click refresh on my checking account website here. Wow. This is very surreal to have a room applaud your checking account. So yeah, that was fun. I went from being borderline poverty level in high cost of living in San Diego to being a multi-millionaire in literally a moment. And also, for the first time ever, I had a job and a boss and a full-time job. And so I worked for Appfolio for 2 more years, and then I decided to leave on the absolute best of terms. Still love that company. But then I found myself in a weird situation. As Diana recently told me, the reward you get for financial independence is an existential crisis. I had spent my entire adult life building this company. My identity was the startup guy trying to make this acquisition happen one day, and it did. And then I found myself as a 36-year-old unemployed guy. And I thought, okay, what am I gonna do now? And I decided I would play StarCraft 2 for an entire year. I am not good at StarCraft, nor have I ever been. It ended up being a gigantic waste of time, and I actually didn't really love that. I'm not really a video game guy. I was just bored being unemployed, and so I decided, okay, I uninstalled StarCraft cold turkey, haven't played since, but then I needed to decide, like, what am I actually going to do with my life? And I knew that like personal finance and investing was my hobby. It's what I love to do. It's my passion. But this was like 2.5 years ago now, and it was a kind of, and continues to be, a tumultuous time. You know, there was political polarization. There was the Me Too movement. There was systemic racism, and even extreme wealth inequality. I thought, you know, what can I do? What does the world need right now? And I thought, you know what? What about a rich white guy mansplaining money to broke people? Maybe a little off the mark, but I followed my heart, and that's what I decided to do. And so, as Diana mentioned, I started an Instagram account 2.5 years ago called Personal Finance Club, where I'd post like daily financial and investing tips. To this day, we still do it. And those posts look like this. You can see this one says, Luis is 35 and broke, and decides to make a change. It talks about how he spends less and invests more, and he's able to retire a millionaire. And as my account started to gain in popularity, something interesting happened. I saw posts pop up that looked like this. If you notice, it says Luis is 35 years old and broke, but decides to make a change. And if you're not really good at those like find 5 difference schemes, well, they're the same picture. Like they just totally and completely ripped me off. It was a word-for-word copy. But that wasn't even the only ripoff. In fact, there was another one. Luis is 35 and broke. 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 This one says Joe is 35 and broke. Kind of racist if you ask me. Why'd they have to change his name? Now it's Jack, Scott, back to Luis. Now it's Lily. And I was like, all right, like respect the feminism there. But wait a minute. Lily made 1.2 million. She made 70% of all the dudes. What the fuck? Can't explain that. All right. We got Joe. Now we've got international. This one just took my exact post, cropped off my logo, added their logo. There's this one. And in fact, that's all. There's all these. My posts were just getting like ripped off left and right. It was crazy. And when I saw this, I had that familiar feeling of chest tightening and anxiety and scarcity. Like these other accounts were ripping me off and making money off me, like not giving me credit. You know, I wasn't even making money. I was doing this as my like hobby and semi-retirement, or as my unemployed hobby. And so to see all these other companies rip me off, I was like, oh, like they're stealing from me. I had that bad feeling again. And so I thought, okay, let's go back to the 2 extreme scenarios. In extreme scenario number 1, or extreme option number 1, I go to war. I lawyer up, I file DMCA takedown requests, copyright, cease and desist, yada, yada, yada. I spend my entire day, week, and life dealing with lawyers and thieves. And, my posts are never stolen again. Okay, and frankly, my focus probably isn't on the right thing. So that doesn't sound great. What's the other extreme scenario? Well, in the other extreme scenario, every single human on the face of the planet steals my content. And in that scenario, I'm the Michael Jackson of personal finance. That sounds pretty good. And so I decided, nice. You never know what happens in a live crowd. So he made like the Michael Jackson noise. So I said, I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to focus on my own lane and continue to build my account. And that's what I did. And so, from then until a year ago, I was just, posting and growing and doing my hobby and doing it for free. And then a year ago, bored during the pandemic, I kept getting the same questions over and over and over. How do I invest? What's a Roth IRA? What's an index fund? And I thought, I'm gonna make a video course, front to back, just like all the basics of investing, like nothing tricky, just like how to invest, just so people who ask me this question can like walk through it A through Z. And my first instinct was to give this course away for free. But I know that consumers don't value free, and they probably wouldn't finish it if it's free. I also thought that if I had a little bit of revenue, I could hire someone and create even more free content. And I thought that this could potentially be another engine for good. So remember 1% for the planet and how rent links did 2% for the planet? I liked that, but I thought that seems insufficient because now I'm financially independent myself, and so I can do even more. And so I said, how about 20% for the planet? And so that is what we have done from that day until this day. And so if you remember, my first year at Rent Links, I made $14,000, before expenses, and it was pretty rough. This side hobby I started in my living room a year ago, bored during a pandemic. In the first year, we made over $600,000. That means that 20% of that straight up went to charity. So in the last 12 months, in fact, like on the plane ride over here, I was like frantically increasing my American Express credit limit. Vivi knows that, who's here, because we were donating too much money. We just did a $25,000 donation or something. And so all these charities are benefiting from what I believe now is like an engine for good, which is great. And so that brings us to me. So today, I'm like so thankful and grateful that I was able to like have this pretty fun career where I built 2 companies and I like integrated giving into their actual cultures and business models. And I was even invited to the conference to speak at that was voted the #1 most prestigious speaking gig in all of North America. If you can't trust that source, then what can you trust? So I ask you, if you ever are faced with a decision where you have those feelings of chest tightening and anxiety and scarcity, consider taking the path of giving, abundance, and humility. Thank you.